Coming to you from the mountains and the plain, the only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. As always, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And we're going to talk today. We talked a little bit yesterday about masks and whether being forced to wear one is a violation of your constitutional rights, whether they are as protective as the experts say that they are. We talked a little bit about that, how Facebook and the fact checkers are going after everyone if they dare have any contrary opinions. I want to talk today generally about how this pandemic and the tyrannical response to it is violating people's rights. We had some episodes in the past, Joe, about this a couple weeks ago. Actually, at this point, I think it was a couple months ago, talking about how they were forcing gun stores to close in California, forcing people to cancel protests that they had planned, canceling in-person voting, go down the list. They closed courthouses. This second wave, this spike, is basically making it all happen again, except instead of it being just Democrat politicians being the ones infringing on our rights, now the Republicans are following suit. But before we get to that, I do want to mention this because this came across my desk this morning, and it's so stupid that we have to cover it. A man in his 20s in Florida died in a motorcycle accident, and he was included in the COVID-19 fatality.
Yeah.
So I want to play that because it's not just the fact that this 20-something man was included in COVID fatality totals, even though he died in a motorcycle crash. Just look how casually the medical official explains and tries to justify it. So let's play that real quick. Let's play cut one.
Well, Charles, they really haven't given us much of an explanation at this point. The way we found out is I was asking the county health officer about 2 coronavirus deaths involving people in their 20s and whether they had any underlying conditions. Then one of his answers surprised us.
The first one didn't have any. He died in a motorcycle accident.
New questions tonight about the accuracy of the state's coronavirus death numbers. Orange County Health Officer Dr. Raul Pino telling us one person reported to have died from COVID was killed in a motorcycle accident. So was it removed from the data?
No.
I don't think so. I have to double check. We were arguing. We were discussing and trying to argue with the state. Not because of the numbers. I mean, it's 100. It's not make any difference if it's 99. Yeah. But the validity that the fact that the individual didn't die from COVID-19, died in a crash. But you can actually argue that it could have been the COVID-19 that caused him to crash. So I don't know the
come on.
conclusion of that one.
COVID-19 causes the crash.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom that he actually said it. Well, yes, I can.
He said it. Well, he said it. And not only did he say that, but he said that the health officials were debating with the feds whether or not to include this in the numbers. And they concluded that, A, it doesn't matter because making it 99 deaths that day instead of 100 doesn't make any difference, which that's insane because if they're doing it with this person, imagine what else they're doing it with. But also that it's arguable that the COVID could have caused the crash. Listen, this guy's not Miss Cleo. He doesn't have his crystal ball. He doesn't have his tarot cards. He can't make any determination what caused this kid to crash. We know that he crashed, and we know that the crash killed him. The fact that he tested positive for COVID-19 post-mortem means nothing. As a 20-something, he probably was asymptomatic.
Right.
So to say that arguably it could have caused it, it's incredible. No, this kid died from a motorcycle crash, and you got caught adding it to the numbers. And the only reason you got caught was because you admitted it, and you believe that there's nothing wrong with it. So we need to audit the entire numbers. We saw from Washington State this week that they actually removed 39 of the deaths from their tally after going through and determining that, no, these people died from natural causes, not from COVID-19. This is happening all across the country. Let's throw up this. We talked about this a while ago. Let's throw up image number 7 just to remind people. This was a guy in Colorado who died with a blood alcohol content of 0.55. So drunk, you could drink his blood and you would get drunk yourself. And they got caught adding him. This is happening all across the country.
Yeah, let's not add. But here's the problem, Max. So right now we have 130,000, 140,000 people that have died of COVID.
Yeah, that's the claim. Yeah.
All right. So I want everyone to just think about this. I'm going to blow your mind. Ready? Ready? What if it's actually only 60 to 70,000? What if they lied about everything? What if, let's take New York for an example, who is completely against President Trump, is completely against Americans, wants a socialist Marxist environment, right, that supports some of the loony left and what they're actually doing to us as a society. What if he just lied? What if it wasn't 18,000 or whatever it was that died in there, and it was only 3,000 or 4,000? And people, let me explain something to you. If you think that the government just woke up on Friday, right before all this started, and grew a conscience and said, hey, we're going to do what's best for the American people, then you have been living under a rock for way too long. Someone needs to get you out and get you some sunlight. And by the way, that sunlight will probably save your life because COVID can't survive in the sun.
Yeah. We don't know why these numbers are being cooked. We know that we've talked about this on the show before, that hospitals do have a financial incentive to list someone as a COVID patient, even if they're asymptomatic, even if they're in for something completely different. They have a financial incentive to do that, right? Whether that's driving it, who knows? We know that in the early days, New York had a financial incentive to make their case numbers seem as high as possible. That's one of the reasons why they were testing as much as they were in the early days. The challenge that we're going to have is auditing these numbers, going back and challenging them after they've been so widely accepted, right? There's no way that we could ever roll that all back. It's just not doable, right? It's too cemented. And we've been fighting every step of the way, but we're going to find in the months and years that follow that there were people who died from COVID-19 that were on hospice care and they were given 3 months to live, and COVID got them first. And we're going to probably find that there are a lot of people like that. A lot of people who were given 6 months to a year to live, and it's horrible. But and anytime anyone's life is cut short, it's horrible. But they're being presented in the same category as people who were taken out in the prime of their life. It's very screwy. It's very, very screwy.
Well, we have to look at something else, right? So let's just look at the cold, hard facts. That it's nearly 80%. Maybe I'm off by a couple percentage points. It's like 82, 83% of people that have died from COVID are over 80.
It's way up there.
They're over 80 years old. And I'm sorry if you're over 80 and you're listening to this podcast and you think that I'm being somewhere along the line, uncompassionate about losing someone that's 80. I'm not uncompassionate at all. I actually want people to live till they're 300. If you want to live till you're 300, I certainly don't. But if you want to live till you're 300, live till you're 300. But if you're going to make a decision on 330 million people in the United States, over 140, let's say it's 140,000 people, Max, Josh, find out what the total number is of deaths for COVID real quick so I can have an accurate number. But if you're going to make a determination on of locking down 300 plus million people in the United States over
141K.
141,000. So 80% of that is about 100,000, 115,000, right, that are over 80. So we have, let's say it's 100,000. We have 41,000. So you're actually going to lock down the economy, the United States, everything that we stand for as a country, over 41,000 deaths. And I'm not discounting the fact that the over 80 are important, but I'm discounting the fact that we're actually destroying our economy and we're letting this Marxist just radicalism infiltrate it. Here's an interesting fact, Max, if I can bring this up real quick. It used to be, so there was a stat that came out last week, and I don't know where I read it. I'm trying to look for it right now. That came out about 1 in 500, 1 in 700, something like that. That state that would encounter a violent incident, right? So go to a gas station, somebody just says, "Give me your money," right? the frequency of those incidences of being assaulted has gone up by like 1,500%. It's now like 1 in 35, 1 in 45 people are having, in the course of a 30-day period, are having these assaulted incidences with people. It used to be that if you live in a bad neighborhood, you have a high chance of crime happening. Now people are in, every neighborhood. You're not immune. People are breaking into homes, tearing down fences. They're creating chaos and havoc and lawlessness everywhere.
Yeah, and the correct number is just shy of 3/4 of all deaths. Coronavirus deaths are over the age of 65. About half are over the age of 75. But the number suggests that it's about 3 out of every 4 are over 65, and that changes by the day, but that's roughly the numbers.
So, look, I want to protect our environment for our kids and grandkids and generations that I'll never see. Right? I do. I want us to have the same type of freedoms and the same type of opportunity that we have today. But I feel like indoctrination in the schools, indoctrination in our government, an infiltration by cancerous left-wing outside influences from other countries is destroying and eroding it through these channels. Like they're weaponizing everything, weaponizing technology, right?
Well, they're not just weaponizing the schools. They're not even allowing the schools to reopen, right? We've talked about this where, yeah, we're very sympathetic to anyone who over the age of 65, 75, over 85 who gets the virus. It's absolutely heartbreaking. But the idea that we should be keeping kids out of school, the idea that I can't teach my son how to swim because it's too dangerous, even though there's not going to be anyone over in those dangerous age demographics there. Like we've talked about on the show, that poor kid, I forget where he was, who committed suicide. He had no history of mental illness. The fact that he was out of school, not with his friends, locked up, he committed suicide. That one suicide, maybe this makes me heartless, but I care more about that suicide than I do about people over the age of 90, over the age of 100 succumbing to the virus. And that's not to say that those fatalities don't matter, right? But to lose children to suicide, it's just unacceptable, right? And I know many elderly people, many people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s would probably agree with the statement. I know that the lieutenant governor of Texas does. He's wholeheartedly willing to help with reopening, even if it means he gets the disease, because it's not worth destroying the economy, destroying younger people's lives. So it's all screwy. None of it really makes sense. Well, it's obvious that the numbers are being cooked, and if you mention it, you get taken down. It's crazy.
I'm sorry, I had to sneeze. So I didn't want you to hear it. Sorry, guys. That was COVID. Okay, maybe it wasn't. I hope it wasn't. No, it wasn't. All right. Bad joke. Too soon.
Definitely too soon.
So, Max, as we start to talk about this, we talked about yesterday the mask mandate. They're hanging their hat on something that has no science, right? The science is actually proven.
Well, no. So as we mentioned, there is science to it. The idea of blocking a cough is scientifically proven. The question is whether a mask will keep you safe. That is the ultimate question out there.
Right. And that by itself is unproven. So take an unproven deal that somewhere along the line that it's going to cut back, what, 0.5%, 1%, 2% probability?
We don't know, yeah.
But that's the problem, is that we're actually mandating that people wear a muzzle. We're actually telling people that you have to wear a muzzle. You have to wear something over your face.
I like the people who call them face diapers. All right. I'm particularly partial to that term that they're using now.
And the part about these face diapers, we'll use yours, face diapers, is that people reuse them. They actually reuse these anyway. So what are you actually protecting yourself from if you have something that you've been breathing into and putting all this stuff into, then you lay it down in the sun, it's hot outside, it starts growing all sorts of stuff. Now you're breathing in bacteria. I mean,
actually, if you leave it in the sun for a long time, you leave it in the heat, it'll grow other bacteria,
correct,
but the coronavirus will die. So that's where it gets weird with their recommendations to use sunlight as a disinfectant for coronavirus. Great, but if you grow mold and all of a sudden now you have mold spores in your lungs, now you have a whole other set of problems. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. We got to get into the main topic of the podcast, which is the rights being violated. But before we do that, I want to throw up a picture, Mr. Producer. I sent it over as we were talking before the show. It's of Ruth Bader Ginsburg being wheeled in to one of her appointments. I think, Mr. Producer, yep. I don't know who added the choo-choo to the top. I find it hilarious. There's no context to it at all. But I wanted to throw this picture up because this was the one picture I could find of this. She now is being treated for another type of cancer. So we knew that she had, pancreatic cancer a while ago. She had, in 2018, in late 2018, she had the lower lobe of her left lung removed because they had discovered malignant tumors there. We were promised at the time that it was not all over her body, right? It hadn't metastasized. And now we're being told months after it started that she's receiving chemo, not on her lungs, not on her pancreas, but on her liver. So cancer has metastasized inside of her body. It's to be this old and to have this many instances of cancer. They're not one-offs, right? This is a serious issue. But she claims that she's healthy enough to be able to continue doing her work because she's hoping that she can outlast President Trump. So that's why we threw up that picture there of her being helplessly wheeled in, because honestly, that doesn't look like someone who has the ability to keep working. But the only way to remove a Supreme Court justice is by impeachment, and the House would never do that. So let's get into the general conversation. I wanted to throw that up there because that was another big news of the day. Violating your rights. With the exception of the Third Amendment, which says the government can't put troops in your home, every single one of your rights in the Bill of Rights are under attack. Every single one.
Every one of them.
So I figure we can go down the list today of just explaining how each one of them are under assault. And the promise from March and April that this was going to be a short-term thing has now turned into the better part of half a year that your rights are being trampled on. At some point, something has to give. I want to talk about this because this is incredible. Let's throw up image number 3. California has banned singing in church.
Yeah.
They banned it. And now if we throw up image number 4, 3 churches are now suing the governor, saying that it's unconstitutional to stop them from singing. Now, Joe, we've talked about this. One of the books of the Bible is called Psalms. It's meant to be sung.
Right.
Many Christian sects
100%.
believe that if you sing a prayer, it is more powerful in God's ears. For the government to simply say you're not allowed to sing in church, and oh, by the way, your churches are also closed, but if they happen to be open, you still can't sing. It just, what am I missing here? That just seems like a clear violation of their constitutional rights.
You're not missing anything. But here's the problem. We're seeing people actually all over the internet, these loony leftists, right, that say, I don't want to hear any more about rights. I want to do about greater good. Question, quote unquote, greater good. You tell me how any of what we're doing is the greater good when the Constitution was set up to protect the people of the United States. It wasn't set up to protect foreign interests. It wasn't set up to protect and give rights to people that don't belong in the United States before people that are actually here. It wasn't set up to, to basically allow for outside influences to tell us what we should and shouldn't do. The WHO, the UN, other foreign countries to come into our country and say, hey, look, this is what you need to be doing. Those interests and those people that are out there trying to erode the Bill of Rights and the Constitution are doing so because they want to hurt us as a country. They want to weaken us. That's why they want to come here. This is the greatest place on earth. People are trying to get in here by the tens of millions of people. And yet they want to change us. They want to make us like third world environments. I mean, I looked at pictures yesterday of Minneapolis. Now, I've been to Minneapolis. I owned a house in Minneapolis at one point. It
looks like Mogadishu.
It is unbelievable.
It looks like Mogadishu. It's
looks
incredible.
They have turned that into a third world country. I was in Detroit 8 months ago now. I was in Detroit 8 months ago. At 8 o'clock at night, it was dark out, right? I'm driving down the street. They were burning tires and trash in the middle of the street. You had to drive around, and they basically told you, do not stop. They will shoot you if you stop. And I was in a car with darked out windows. You want to know why? Because they're like, just so you know, they just look for the opportunity to shoot someone. Yeah. That's just what it is. The police don't even go there. This is in the United States. These are these are in areas, by the way, that are highly controlled by, I'm going to say it, people that have not been here for more than one generation. They haven't. These are people that are literally new to the country.
Here's the problem. It's the latest state to impose a mask order was Colorado, as you mentioned, Democrat governor. But before that, it was Texas.
Right.
The governor of Texas is not being controlled by foreign interests. He is kowtowing to the mob's demands, but there are cowardly people in office who are bowing down to those demands. It's incredible. Let's throw up this. The reason we're talking about the churches is because that's a clear violation of your First Amendment right. The First Amendment says that Congress, the government, because this also regulates state and local governments, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. They're not allowed to abridge your right to free expression of your religious beliefs. And saying that churches are closed and you're not allowed to sing in church, it should be obvious. Let's throw up image number 8. This is from New York. Image number 8. This is NYC Mayor nixes large events except Black Lives Matter protests. So the only way you can actually have a large gathering, right? The Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, says that no government shall prohibit the free exercise of your freedom of speech or the right of the people to peaceably assemble. But in New York City, the only way you can do that is if it's a Black Lives Matter protest. If you want to protest for anything else, if you want to assemble for anything else, they're not letting you do it. That is a clear violation of your First Amendment rights. Right. And where are the lawsuits? Where are the judges? Right. Donald Trump can't do anything without some random judge in Hawaii saying that it's unconstitutional. Where are the judges intervening and stopping this? Where are they?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, we're suing the governor here. And I'm pushing hard on a couple of municipalities and counties to say, listen, this is the hill to die on. This is the hill. This is the hill we need to die on. Right now, this hill is the one we should die on.
Yeah, well, the governor's order specifically says you only have to wear a mask, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're over the age of 11.
Right.
Where did that come from? That sounds arbitrary, which would make it unconstitutional, right? If you cannot prove that there is a legitimate reason for that and why it's 11 and not 12 or not 30 or not 60, right, it is arbitrary. And because it is arbitrary, it would be unconstitutional, simply for the fact that they made it up out of thin air and they have no actual reason for it. Why is no one arguing over that, right? How can you say that it's safe for an 11-year-old but not for a 12-year-old? It makes no sense.
Why? Let's just talk about this, right? Why is it that Antifa's taken over Portland? Why are the people not in the streets just beating these people senseless? I mean, let's just call it what it is. We're in a war right now. I told you this 3 months ago. I go, look, this is going to lead to a civil war. It's going to lead to it. Now we're already in the civil war, and people are starting to arm themselves, but they're not yet to the point where they're willing to get out there and fight. But the fight is coming, Max, and it's coming in every state. And these people, these protesters that go out there and burn and loot, I'm going to tell you, it's coming. It's coming. They had a hearing yesterday, right? We talked about this yesterday. They had a hearing yesterday where they said that 3%ers, they said that militias, state militias.
And let's explain what 3%ers are to anyone who doesn't know. Can you explain it or you want me to explain it?
You can explain it, but it's basically a community organization of people that want to defend their environment, right? They want to defend.
Well, the reason they're called 3%ers is because of what happened. It's based on the notion that at the American Revolution, only 3% of the colonists actually took up arms against the British government.
Right.
Now that has been disputed over the years. Some people say it's higher, some people say it's lower. But the reason they're called 3%ers is because of the idea that not everyone needs to take up arms to push off tyranny. It only takes a few people doing the right thing. That's why 3%ers are called 3%ers. So when they present them as if they are radicals, they are no different than King George going after the founding fathers and saying you are radical terrorist extremists.
And they did the same thing.
It's the same language.
Same thing. But I'm going to tell you there is right now. There are hundreds of thousands of people in the United States that are signing up to be a part of the 3%ers. They are recognizing in the government that, oh crap, these people are not playing around. But you know what they didn't say in that hearing yesterday? They didn't say anything about BLM. They didn't say anything about Antifa. They didn't say anything about these left-wing, absolute radical people that are killing 8-year-olds and one. Right. And so they put it on as, I'm a adjunct professor at, George Washington. And I'm thinking to myself, so you've really never done anything. You probably don't understand the concept.
AKA, you don't have tenure and you'll probably be gone in a couple of years and off to somewhere else.
That's cool. Yeah, because they're actually losing money at a record pace.
So let's throw up image number 2, because we just talked about how your First Amendment rights are being violated. We're seeing a massive surge in gun sales across the country.
Right.
Every single month is setting a record for background checks, and the experts are suggesting that 40% of these people buying guns are first-time gun buyers, buying guns for the first time.
Right.
This all started when states like California, New York, New Jersey, the states that were hardest hit at the time, forced gun stores to close. Now, when California issued that order that we talked about, was it yesterday or the day before, ordering all in-business sales to cease. You're not allowed to do any business indoors anymore in California. That is affecting gun stores because California law also prohibits gun stores from selling guns outside of their business. That's the dreaded gun show loophole, right? The gun shows just means that a gun store can go to another location and act as the gun store and sell at that other location, whether it be a fairground, an expo hall, whatever, a gun show. California's gun show law ban says that if you have an FFL, if you're going to sell firearms, it has to be within your brick and mortar establishment. Or if you are an at-home FFL, it has to be within your registered address. So they can't go out and sell guns. They can't sell guns outside their building. But now they're not allowed to sell guns inside their building either.
Right.
So this surge is largely attributed to A, being told that you can't, B, seeing all these prisoners, violent criminals being released from prison because apparently their lives matter more than the people they're going to now victimize. And 3, obviously, the BLM protests where they're seeing cities burned to the grounds. Of course, they want to arm themselves. And the solution to the closures of gun stores was actually pretty ingenious. People started building their own guns. They started building their own guns, which sounds crazy, but it really isn't. It's relatively easy to do nowadays. And now the left is going after that because people were able to use these gun kits to build their own firearms. The leftists hate that. So you can't buy a gun indoors. And also now you're not going to be allowed to buy a gun, to build your own gun. So we're going to cover that in a second. But before we do, we have to take a real quick break. And we'll be back just on the other side of this 20-second break. Don't go anywhere.
Ronald Reagan famously said that our freedoms are never more than a generation away from extinction. Conservative Daily exists to make sure that never happens. With our community of 700,000 members, we fight every day to hold Congress's feet to the fire and stop them from surrendering our rights and freedoms. The fight to take this country back is not over. Please join our movement right now by going to conservative-daily.com and clicking the subscribe button to sign up for our free call to action newsletters. We have a chance to save this country, but only if we all work together. Again, this is conservative-daily.com, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button at the top.
And we're back from that quick break. Sorry about that. I blame producer Josh's chubby fingers. That's my excuse, and I'll stick to it. But we're back from the break. Before we were going to the break, we were talking about how people were not allowed to go to gun stores, so they were forced to build their own guns at home. And the Democrats are taking great offense to that. They're introducing legislation to make that illegal. Let's throw up image number 1. This is a bill that's currently being advanced in Congress. It's an attempt, and the bill's called the Stop Home Manufacture of Ghost Guns Act. They're calling them ghost guns. They're so angry that people turned to building their own guns when they were told they weren't allowed to go into gun stores, that now they want to get rid of the ability to build your own guns, right? They want to close down the gun stores, and they want to close that dreaded loophole. God forbid people be allowed to exercise their Second Amendment rights. But Joe, we've seen this all across the board. We've seen permitting authorities, like that one sheriff in North Carolina who was, thank goodness, slapped down, saying that you're not allowed to get a carry permit We're seeing this across the board. The Second Amendment has become a second-class right, and even as these violent mobs spread around the country, there are people in power who want to limit Americans' ability to defend themselves, and they want to use the coronavirus as an excuse to do it.
Right.
Yeah. Sherry in the comment section is asking, how do you build your own guns? It's actually easy. If we throw up that image again, image number 1, so that picture of that handgun is a homemade gun. The way it comes to you is it comes to you 80% built. It's built 80% of the way, and it's up to you to drill the last holes and to file down the last sections to make it a legal firearm. So the way it works is they send you what's called an 80% gun, and you basically build the last 20% to make it a functional firearm. But good question.
Yeah, and it's untrackable, right? And really what it comes down to, it is untrackable. And I think people are
for good reason.
And for very good reason. But here's the problem that we're up against is that by passing these laws, we're making everyone in the United States, by all the laws that they pass, I mean, there's tons of laws on the books. I mean, tens of thousands of laws. I don't know if anybody that's actually listening that actually understands. I don't know any lawyers that actually understands all the laws that are out there on the books. And the Supreme Court came out and said that ignorance is no excuse for the law.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking it.
Is no excuse for breaking it. So my question is that by passing more of these laws that restrict your rights, are you as an American actually becoming more free? And as the radical left turns towards Marxism, which is a controlling environment to control what you can make, what opportunities you can have, only if they decide that you actually can have those opportunities or you can lead, then you get those opportunities. Is that something you want to subject yourself to? Is it something you want to subject your kids to? Can you live in a society where everything you do is controlled or told that you have to do it? Do you need a mommy and daddy for the 60, 70, 80 years that you live? Do you need a mommy and daddy?
Yeah.
Are you willing to live in this world where, people poop on the streets and put up tents and do all the things that we allow the homeless population to do? And you could say, oh, we feel bad for the homeless population. I don't. I did not make poor choices in my life. I did not do drugs. I did not put myself in a position where I'm on the street. And by the way, about 50% of those people that are homeless and on the street want to live their life that way. It's not because they can't work. They don't want to work. Right? They don't want to work. There's no mental health issues. There's no issues that they're facing. They're just a bunch of lazy people who would rather live in a tent and get a free ride. That's truth. You can say, oh, you're being heartless. Okay, I'm heartless because I made good decisions in my life. So I don't have to live in a tent. I don't want to live in a tent. And I don't want people out there pooping on the streets. I just don't want it to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, Sherry wrote again in the comment section that people will start building illegal firearms now. So the way that the law works is ever since our founding, Americans, if you're allowed to legally own a gun, you've always been allowed to build your own gun. And going all the way back to before the American Revolution, American colonists were building their own firearms because they just, especially during the Revolution, they didn't have a supply chain. They were cut off. So you've always been allowed to build your own gun. If you give me $20, Sherry, I could walk you through Home Depot in the plumbing section and you come out with a shotgun. Right? It's very easy to do. The technology today, though, has made it much easier to build functional handguns, functional rifles, and that's what terrifies people. Because yes, people will build them illegally, but that's already been happening, right? People have already been illegally obtaining guns. The question is whether that is a good enough reason to restrict the right of law-abiding Americans to do the same. So we've gone through the First Amendment, through the Second Amendment. As I mentioned, the Third Amendment, no one's quartering troops in people's homes, but if they are, that would be an amazing topic to cover. The Third Amendment really gets a bad rap, but the founders were very salty over being forced to house British soldiers in their homes during the Revolutionary War. The next, though, is the Fourth Amendment, which is the idea that you're supposed to be secure in your papers and effects, that you can't just get raided by the government without a warrant. If a government official wants to come and snoop through your home, they're supposed to have to provide a warrant and a legal justification to do it. Let's throw up image number 6. This is a bill that is making its way through Congress. It's kind of stalled. It's come back again. It's HR 6666, which, wow, if you're gonna create a bill to authorize health officials to go into your home to contact trace and test you and quarantine you, maybe don't give the bill number the mark of the beast. Maybe that's just a very simple suggestion. But no, that bill would authorize the Secretary of Health and Human Services to award grants to eligible entities, that would be states, localities, and nonprofits, to conduct diagnostic contact tracing for COVID-19 and related activities, such as going into individuals' residences and for other purposes, right? So this is a bill to set aside federal money to let contact tracers force their way into people's homes. That is being debated. It's already been happening in California. It's been debated in places like New York and New Jersey. I don't think they ever went through with it. But that is a clear violation of your Fourth Amendment right. If you are healthy and you are an asymptomatic individual, even if you have COVID-19, that is not a justification for government officials to force their way into your home. So believe it or not, through all of this, the tyrants trying to use this to their advantage are actually pushing to force their way into your home. It's incredible. But the mainstream media doesn't cover it. We try our best to cover it because we looked at, just because we saw that a bill was actually called 666. Say, hey, what's that about? Oh, it's to let the government force their way into your home to test you and to quarantine you. Oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? But they're pushing for this. Your Fourth Amendment rights mean nothing in a pandemic, just like your First Amendment and your Second Amendment don't either.
Correct. Next. They don't. I mean, I'm trying to tell people right now that everyone wants to yell about it, but you got to be able to do something about it. You got to stand up. You got to risk something. You got to want to be able to change what they're doing. Otherwise, Nate said, hey, they're attacking us on every, one of the comments, they're attacking us on every front. They are, because we let them. Yeah. It is real easy to fix this. It is incredibly easy to fix this, right? And that is, you collectively stand up and you stop complaining about it, and you just do. You show up in big numbers and you say, we've had enough. We've had enough. That's what it takes. It takes you getting off your butt and stop thinking, I live in a safe environment now because I live in the suburbs of in a nice neighborhood. You're not safe anymore. There is no safety amongst this Marxist bullcrap that we're dealing with right now. No safety. There's no place you can hide.
Adelia Johnson writes in the comments, you people are crazy. Well, she used the wrong version of R, but I'll assume that's what she meant. You people are crazy. No one coming in your home, you liars. We just literally showed the bill. We're not going to show the entire bill because you can look it up. It's HR 6666. We literally just showed the summary description written by the bill's author, that it is to provide federal funding so that states and localities and nonprofits can use that funding to come into people's homes, to test them, to contact trace, and to enforce quarantines. That's a fact. That's a fact. That is a Democrat bill that has co-sponsors, and they're trying to push it through. So to call us liars, we literally just cited the bill.
But that's okay. You're liars because you know why they worry about us? You know why they show up on this page? You know why these clowns and
we're not supposed to be talking about that.
Oh, you're not supposed to talk about it? And they're afraid, Max. They're afraid. They're afraid that tens of thousands every single episode are listening to this, and they're getting smarter. Every single one of them. Every single one of them.
It's true.
And that's why they're here. These little Antifa freaks literally want to come out here and say, hey, look, this is a lie. This is a lie. Well, wake up. It's not a lie. And stop taking your money.
She writes back, thank you, but you're crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. We just cited exactly, but you're crazy. Okay.
Bye.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Don't let the door hit you or the good Lord split you.
We've gone through the First Amendment, how that's being violated. We've gone through the Second Amendment, how that's being violated. Third Amendment, we explained. Fourth Amendment. Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment is very clear. We talked about this yesterday, right? That no person can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The idea, the government's ability to quarantine someone requires due process, right? For the government to say you are sick, you have to be quarantined so you don't get other people sick. That is a form of due process. The government has to prove you're sick. What we're seeing today with these mask orders is that they are not having to prove that people are sick. They are trying to apply those powers to everyone because so many people with COVID-19 are asymptomatic. That doesn't fly, right? Imagine if the government tried to arrest everyone because some of us are criminals. So, well, we know some of you are criminals, so everyone has to be detained until we can figure it out. No, it'd be a clear violation, right? Just like it'd be a clear violation for them to forcibly quarantine everyone without proving that they're sick. The same applies to the mask. They have every right to force people who are known to have a disease to put on a mask on, just like they have every right to quarantine them, right? That right, whether you agree with it or not, is established by the Supreme Court. It's established in previous cases. What they do not have the right to do is to force healthy people to act like they're sick or to be punished as if they're sick without any avenue for that healthy person to prove that they're healthy, without any avenue for that healthy person to prove that the government has not made their case, right? Because for the government to erode or take away your rights, the government has to prove it's necessary. A blanket order saying everyone has to wear a mask. The government has not met that obligation. They have not met that standard. They have not proven that everyone who falls under the order has a legitimate reason for doing it. They just don't. It's the clearest violation of your constitutional rights that we have so far.
All right, so let me. I'm going to troll Idalia Johnson. I just looked at her Facebook page. This is hilarious, right? Are you ready for this? She's a nutball, right? I mean, I go and look at her page. First of all, she's a hateful racist. I'm going to say it on here. I think she's a hateful racist. But she has an article that she put on here that talks about militia leader says membership skyrocket after they begin showing up where white militias protested with little challenge from police, right? First of all, it's not true. And then the guy that runs it, I don't know if you've heard about this, the NFAC, the Not, Blank Around Coalition. Great name, right? I mean, it's something I want my kids to actually say. The leader of this black militia called the NFAC. And then inside the articles that she actually promotes, it basically says that the book of For Real Though, I couldn't share this content if I wanted to as satire. So
let's not even give her a platform.
But I want to talk about how nuts these people on the left are. They're nutballs. She represents the absolute craziest, non-logical side of the part that actually just of the left that marginalizes people that have a brain in their head. And I got to tell you, these other Antifa groups and these other just left-wing groups that support pedophilia, rapists, and are funded by pedophiles, rapists, and closet racists. Yeah, this is what you get. You get racist people like this that are sent to our page and want to make comments, right? So I'm going to tell you, Max, I'm going to call them out at every corner. I'm going to call out the Democrat Party at every corner because, frankly, everything that we're dealing with right now is by a bunch of un-Americans, and they are muling people along and saying, hey, listen, we need a Marxist society. We need a socialist society. People shouldn't have a lot of money. People shouldn't be able to work for opportunity. You should just basically have nothing. That's what's happening right now. That's what represents the Democratic Party.
Mars Mike wrote in, thank you for sharing this information with us. I do appreciate it. No problem, Mars. Make sure you share it, and that goes for everyone. We're going down the list of all of the rights within the Bill of Rights that are being violated. We're still only halfway through, so make sure you hit the share button because the left doesn't want you to hear this. The left doesn't want you to think critically about how what they're doing is violating your rights. So we just did the Fifth Amendment. Clear, it's a denial of due process. You have no right to fight these masks. You have no ability to fight the mask orders and prove that you are not sick. So obviously it's a clear violation of your right to due process. When you get to the Sixth Amendment, that's where it gets really interesting because the Sixth Amendment, among other things, gives you the right to a speedy and public trial. That means that you have the right to confront your accusers in a fast manner and in a manner that's open to the public. Mr. Producer, let's throw up image number 5. So we talked about this a little bit in the beginning of the pandemic, but this just happened a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. Federal courts in Houston and Galveston closed amid surge in COVID-19 cases. So all across this country, whenever there's an outbreak, when there's a spike, the courts all close. They close down. They don't hold all their cases. Many cases get backed up weeks or months, and the cases that they do hold are held electronically. So they're not held in a public forum where anyone can just show up and watch, right? And the cases aren't being held in a speedy manner. So it's a clear violation of people's Sixth Amendment right to a fair and speedy trial and public trial, right? If you're not allowed to do it out in the open, you're not allowed to confront your accuser in the open for all to see, and you're not allowed to do so in a fast manner, you're waiting weeks and weeks and weeks because the judge is too afraid of getting the virus himself. It's a violation of your rights. Clear as day.
And what else you need to understand is that there's a period of time that your due process that you have to try that case, speedy trial.
Yes.
That if you don't meet it, they have to drop the case. and they can't retry you on it.
Yeah, that usually tends to fall not on the court. We've never really gotten to a position where the courts themselves are the ones violating people's rights. Usually when that comes into play, Joe, it's when the prosecutors keep stalling and stalling and stalling, right? When the prosecutors are usually the ones violating the rights, typically not the judges themselves. But this is uncharted ground. We've never been in this position before. And yet that's what's happening. The courts themselves are the ones violating your rights, not the prosecutors. I mean, we look at the Seventh Amendment really doesn't come into play too much.
Max, they're not even arresting people. Did you know that? There's people walking around the street with 20 or 25 different violations, different citations to show up to court. There's, I mean, literally people that are breaking the law every single day. They're like, I'm going to go rob this person. They don't get arrested.
Yeah, and that's the one bit where the Seventh Amendment could possibly come into play, not with COVID, but with the riots that we're seeing. The Seventh Amendment pretty much says that when it comes to common law cases, you can't set bail or fine people. They have to be tried by a jury. No excessive bail. The Eighth Amendment is no excessive fines or cruel and unusual punishments. We see that come into play when we see these rioters let out of jail, right? Like the government's supposed to be protecting the people. When a rioter is arrested on a Tuesday, and because New York and New York City have gotten rid of bail, there's no bail, that felony rioter is then let out and he's rioting the next night. That is not a violation of the rioter's rights. He's very happy to be let out of jail with no bail, right? But it's a violation of our rights. It's a violation of our right to actually make sure that these people aren't just released back onto the streets. It's absolutely crazy. The Ninth Amendment is what really is important in this case. The Ninth Amendment says that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. That's important because when we hear all these, like yesterday, for example, Joe, Governor Cuomo in New York said that if Donald Trump does not force all Americans to wear masks, 40,000 people will die. He said that. If Donald Trump does not create out of thin air a nationwide mask mandate, 40,000 people will die. Nowhere in the Constitution does the executive have the power to do that.
Right.
Because that is not an enumerated power given to the executive, it is, according to the Ninth Amendment, either reserved to the people or, in the case of the 10th Amendment, reserved to the states. This is important because they're trying to create powers of government out of thin air and say you don't have the right to do this because the Constitution doesn't give you that right. But the founders were very smart. The founders included the 9th and 10th Amendments to make sure that the federal government could never make that argument, could never say, oh, well, it doesn't say that you have the right to walk outside without a mask on, so that means I'm allowed to force you to. Those are the amendments. Those amendments are there, and they're supposed to be protecting you. And yet nothing's being done. No injunctions, no court orders. They're just allowed to walk all over us. It's so infuriating.
So what do we do? This gets down to the point where we have to at some point stand up, and we say it every time, right? So what do we do? Well, you start by, let me just tell you what you can start by. If you didn't even want to connect with anyone else, you didn't want to be a part of a group, there is a couple things that you can actually do. Number one, you can write your congressman, you can email your congressman, you could take 45 minutes out of your day to every single day call them. And I'm not talking one of you call, but 50, 75. Call 10 of your friends and call those 10 friends that are like-minded, hopefully that you hang out with logical people. Have those 10 people actually call and tell the same thing to those 10 people. Say, listen, I want you to actually call your congressman, but I also want you to pick up the phone, find 10 people that you talk to the most on your phone that are like-minded, right, that are friends of yours. I want you to tell them to call. And you can actually commit people over and over and over again to take a little bit of time out of your day and stop letting the madness occur. Make the phone calls. And then we can do the same thing when it comes to showing up at the Capitol. Max, we've talked about it the last couple of days about this organization, FEC United, right? And that we started in Colorado, so FEC Colorado. And you can go to fecunited.com and you can sign up if you're in Colorado. If you're outside of Colorado, you can sign up. Just to let you know, as you sign up, we're trying to put those in categories of the different states, and we're building out these different pillars, which are going to come after and start protecting these rights. Like we have a lawsuit that we're actually getting ready to file right now against the governor in Colorado. We've got other lawsuits that we're going to file against different municipalities for and putting in mandates in place as well. We're filing for injunctions. So this some of the stuff that you can actually do. We're trying to empower parents on the education side to force the school boards to open so that their kids can actually get back mentally to a safe place. So there's just a lot of things that we're doing right now that this organization stands for. But it doesn't happen if you don't start doing something just individually. You don't even have to be a part of the organization. You can actually start doing this now and having those conversations with your legislators in your state. But if you don't do something now, I'm telling you right now, we are headed down a path where we can change it. One person can change it. Like the guy that said, well, if you have 100 cases of COVID or deaths of COVID and it's now 99, it's not that big of a deal. Well, I thought you said that.
It is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
It is a big deal. And everyone has to act like it's a big deal.
Because if you say the same thing about this Black Lives Matter movement, you'd think that there's basically genocide happening where cops are out there just shooting black people. The truth is that's not happening. It's not happening.
Imagine if you said that to someone supporting Black Lives Matter. Imagine if you said, well, technically, maybe this guy could have just been killed by the police, but it doesn't really matter whether there's one extra unarmed black man added to the total. It doesn't really matter. They would be furious.
Right.
They would be furious at you if you were a government official deliberately altering data because you say it doesn't matter. They'd be furious. You'd have your house burned down. Like, no joke.
Yeah.
But with coronavirus, it doesn't matter. So what if we just tricked everyone and just got caught, including a 20-something-year-old being killed in a motorcycle crash, including him in COVID fatalities? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If they're willing to do that, if they're willing to be as brazenly, to do something that brazen, to say that a motorcycle crash victim died of COVID, just imagine the other stuff that they're pulling.
Right. 100%.
Imagine what else they're doing if they're that brazen. Any final words as we wrap this up, Joe?
Courage is as infectious as fear, and a lack of action is just being complicit in the behavior of the left, right? So this loony left it's bad, right? They use conjecture, they use propaganda, they use lies, they use something that can't exist or doesn't exist. They just make it up. And so if you want to change it, you got to be able to speak up. You got to be able to call them out because, frankly, the only reason that they're winning is because we're like, nobody can really do this. They can't let this happen, but they are letting it happen.
Yeah.
Right? So organize, pay attention, get involved, and do your part. And if you want to, go to fecunited.com, sign up, and we'll be in your state soon.
Yeah, and just to recap what we talked about this episode, we went down the list of the Bill of Rights and all of the rights that are being violated by the tyrants using the coronavirus as an excuse to go after your rights. Practically every right that you have enumerated within the Bill of Rights is under attack right now. So my final word would be to act like it. Remember that the founding fathers, the colonists, went to a war in part over a couple pence tax on tea, on paper, on sugar, on molasses. Being forced to pay a couple pennies extra on these basic products was enough to force many of them over the edge. Your rights are being violated. It's time for you to act like it. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. Remember that you can download the podcast on Apple Podcasts if you have an iPhone, as well as the Google Play Store if you have an Android phone. You can also find us on the Podbean app, as well as conservative-daily.com/podcast. We live stream on Facebook and YouTube every day, so check us out there. And if you're on Parler, search for us, follow us at Conservative Daily, all one word, and we will follow you back. So again, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And remember that the fight to take back our country is not over, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together.